So welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for October 21st, 2021. We'll follow our agenda as outlined in the issue, which was issue number 1103. Before we get started, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to share?
17.0.1.
That was out today?
No, that was out yesterday or the day
yesterday?
before. I think it was on Tuesday. I'm not
sure. 17 was Tuesday, and then 0.1 was yesterday.
That's good. Thanks for, I guess, feedback we're getting in terms of, I know I've seen at least a couple issues have been reporting on 17, so people are trying it out, and it's great to get that feedback. I guess, Richard, do you want to mention 16 LTS next week?
Yeah, sure. So there was a 16 release yesterday, and that was really just to tidy up because we'd planned a release the week before, but then we had the security releases, so that release didn't happen, and we ended up with a bunch of commits that weren't released. So those have been released now, and that was the intended to be the last current release of Node 16. So the next release of Node 16 is going to be on Tuesday. That will be the LTS transition. So Node 16 will become an LTS release. By tradition, we don't normally put anything else into the LTS transition releases. So that will just effectively be a release with the code name added and the LTS bit set in the process release structure. So it should be a very sort of light release, but from that release, Node 16 will be LTS. That just means that we're a bit more careful about what goes in. So changes to master will still end up in Node 16 while it's in active maintenance, active LTS, but they won't go in immediately. So we will normally want to see changes that land on master go into a current release, which is now Node 17, before we pull it into Node 16 LTS after next week.
Thanks for that update. Any other things that people want to announce, discuss before we move on to the agenda?
I believe our governance document says that new collaborator nominations are supposed to be announced. So I'm going to announce that Voltrex Master is their GitHub handle. Will be has been nominated and passed the nomination to be a collaborator, and I will be onboarding them Friday morning Pacific time, Friday evening, Europe and time, and points east of there until you hit the international date line, I suppose. Yeah, so that's all there is to that. So congratulations and all that stuff.
Great to hear. Anything else before we move on to the agenda items? If not, the next section is the CPC and board meeting updates. I don't have anything from the board side. I don't know. I didn't make the CPC meeting if there was one this week because of NodeConf, but I actually thinking it was canceled. But I'll let Rich tell us what happened on that front.
There was, I believe you're correct that there was no CPC meeting, and there, this was, even if it was, this was going to be the work, we do the alternating week thing where there's the meeting and then there's the working meeting kind of thing. This was going to be a working meeting. There wouldn't be very much to announce probably anyway, but nothing this week. Hopefully next week I'll let you know then.
Okay, thanks. So let's move on to the issues tagged for the agenda. The first one is add info on project's usage of Coverity. This is 40506. Richard actually did the work to get Coverity working again. And, we were having a discussion of like, well, how should we give people access? Who should be able to have access to the Coverity data? So I wrote up this PR just to say, this is my suggestion, which is basically any collaborator who wants to have access to the data can have access to it, along with my suggestion for like how they request it through the build working group. And I put it on the agenda here just to make sure that the TSC didn't have any concerns with us sharing that data fairly broadly, like it's to the collaborator base. My thinking is that's fine, but I always thought it's good to get more input on that, so that's why it's here. I guess it's like the specific question is like, does anybody have any concern with, any collaborator being able to be added to the Coverity project, get the reports and see what it's reporting? I will note in the minutes then that no concerns were expressed.
I guess the only thing I would add is at the moment, the administrators of the Coverity project are build working group members, and that's really been historic. And it's mainly because in order to run the Coverity scan in the CI, you need to be an administrator to be able to get hold of the download to install onto the actual CI machines. But I'm open to adding more administrators if there's some structure around who has access to what, and not gate membership of Coverity on the build working group, because that is quite a small number of people. But as far as the PR is concerned, I haven't approved it yet, but I think it's a good representation of where we currently stand. But it doesn't, it doesn't have to be that way. We can potentially open up, add more administrators of the Coverity side, so that adding and removing people from the project is not gated on a few sort of build infrastructure people that currently are admins in the project.
Yeah, we could make, like, for example, all the TSE admins and then do it through the admin repo if we wanted to.
Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate. I don't think there's a automatic way to link things from GitHub to Coverity, so there is going to be a bit of admin involved, but yeah.
So I guess, I mean, I'm happy to have it be as is for now. But yeah, if anybody thinks we should move it to something else, I'm also, like Richard is, if we've got volunteers to help admin it, even better, right?
Yeah, I mean, let's see where we get to, and hopefully we'll have some some interest in people just joining to see the reports, and
yeah,
hopefully triage and look at the issues being raised.
Okay, so if there's no more discussion on that one, we can move on to the next issue. That's 40464. So this Metamove one or more collaborators to emeritus. Rich?
Yeah, so our governance process does not permit a collaborator to be moved to emeritus unless one of two things happens. One is that they ask for it or announce it, and the other is that the TSC takes an action to do it. So this PR, which I'm going to put for convenience of the two people on here who haven't yet approved it, put in the chat there, is to move one inactive collaborator to emeritus. They haven't responded, and to request to either say yes or no. And so while we probably technically can land it as is, I think it would be much more bulletproof to have 50% plus one of the TSC approving it. So if we, so that like if we want to consider it a vote, it passes. So given that we right now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 approvals, so 4 more would be required to have this pass. So if TSC folks could please review and approve if they believe it approvable, that would be awesome. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. So let me just
I'll remove it. Actually, I won't remove the TSC agenda. I'll leave it there in case it doesn't get closed by next week. Go on.
Okay. So the next one is document considerations for inclusion in core. That's 40338. I think that's one that you were also stick-handling through, right?
Yeah, I think it's landable at this point, but I wanted to just have it at a meeting one last time, just in case somebody thinks it should stay open a little longer so they can look at it and think about it or anything like that. It does only have 3 approvals, which is less than I was hoping. I'll paste this one into the there as well. This is kind of trying to help that this is like a first baby step on the way to resolving that long open to be or not to be in core conversation around specifically modules, although Michael, you want to think of it more as features perhaps, which is great by me, but the purpose of the initial purpose was to discuss exactly how to handle like modules and dependencies. And so, so that's what this is all about. Just basically tries to document pros and cons and doesn't really take much of a position on anything because we're having such a problem arriving at conclusions. And the initial thing that Robert asked for when he opened the issue that he opened, the to be or not to be in core issue, was that perhaps we can, document the considerations we make so that we don't have to go around in circles reiterating them over and over again. Even if we don't necessarily all agree on X is more important than Y, we can at least agree that X and Y both need to be considered. So that's what this does. I hope we can land it, but if not, please say something.
Yep. And I think it's useful, like you said, just it's nice to be able to have a, like, here's the where what we would typically consider versus, having to say it and reiterate it verbally or something.
Or at least we hope it will be useful. We'll see going forward if it's useful or not.
Yeah. Okay, so if nothing more on that one, the next one is the nominating Voltrex Master as collaborator, which I think we've already covered the announcements. Nothing to talk about on that one. The next one is add initial list of technical priorities 40235. This is basically on the agenda again. I think a little bit like the inclusion in core. It has 3 approvals, so it is landable, but I would like as many sort of people to have looked at it and approved as possible. I'll paste it in the chat here as well. I think it's kind of it's important that we've agreed on what we think is technical priorities. So it'd just be nice to have a little bit more of a reflection in that. Oops, and I did it just to Rich instead of everybody.
So I admit that I have not been following this one closely. So I apologize if I'm asking a question that's already been answered, but I mean, this, traditionally we have not had a roadmap, and this kind of feels a bit roadmappy, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Like maybe, early,
I would
small. You can, maybe we've outgrown not having a roadmap. But then I guess the next question is like who decides? Is this like something? Is the idea that this is something all the collaborators have decided, or is this a TSC stamp of approval you want on this, or not sure?
So, I mean, the history is we have the Next 10 group, which was like saying, let's look at what made us successful in the first 10 years. Mm-hmm. And, let's come up with what's important for us to, not a roadmap, because there's no guarantee anybody's going to work on anything particular, but what is it we think is important for us to be successful going forward?
Yeah, and I see in it now that it says that this will be reviewed by the Next 10 team and the TSC on a 6-month basis.
Yeah, I put that in because I think that's important, and that's kind of, I think it's, the TSC should be on board to say, we do think this is important. These are things we should support, as opposed to, no, we don't think this is important, right? Like the goal is to highlight the things that we think are necessary for us to be successful. And, we brought together people who were interested in having that discussion. We had like a mini summit a little while back where we had a little bit broader. This was the list we came out with. And, hopefully, I don't know if like this is one potentially that is worth an app mention to the whole collaborator base to make sure people have seen it. I haven't done that because I know we don't want to do that a lot, but that was one thought I had. But this was the things that we came together and we said, for us to be successful for, going forward, we need to come up with we need to take these into account. Some of them we actually already do a good job. So if you look at like up-to-date JavaScript run, language features, as I mentioned, Michael Zasso does a great job of keeping us up to date on a recent V8. So we get that, and we can basically say, check, we're covering that, we're good. Some of the other ones like good types, I think it's that everybody agrees that that's something it's important that we cover. Whether we need to do anything or not is another question. Like it could be that we look at that and say, well, that the types for Node are working perfectly. The way they're maintained is great. But it's really to acknowledge that it's important enough that we should look at that and say, yeah, it's perfect, or maybe there's something the project can do to improve that. And that's sort of like in each one of those, we would look to, as the next step, look through them and say, yeah, are we good? In which case, that's great. We're on track for being successful. Or is it a gap and we should, think about what we could do?
Okay, thanks. I'm taking a look at it right now.
Okay, so that's kind of where that's coming. So I don't know, people's thoughts on the app mentions to collaborators. Is that
Did we mention TSC on it yet?
it's been on the agenda for a couple weeks. I don't think I did the app mention, but I have mentioned it in the meetings.
Yeah. I think this is an example of something that app mention collaborators is reasonable.
Okay, so I'm going to say discuss.
Let's see if anybody else has another opinion. Real quick.
Okay.
Okay, doesn't sound like it.
Okay, to collaborators was reasonable doing that. Okay, oops, no JS/collaborators, right? Okay. Okay, we'll do that. Thanks. Discuss. Okay, so rename the default branch from master to main. We still have about, I think, 5 or 6 repositories to rename. And I think we've got sort of people who are volunteering or tagged, so it's just a matter of waiting till that happens. I did, the last time I mentioned that the rename of Readable Stream did cause somebody using quite an old set of libraries some issue. It did uncover one redirect that GitHub wasn't redirecting, so they've redirected that. I'm not sure it's completely resolved the issue, but just as a heads up that we did run into that one issue, but otherwise I don't think there's anything to talk about this week unless somebody else has one. If not, there is migration of core modules to primordials. So that one's 30697. I believe I saw that Jarish had opened the issue that we talked about last week to discuss, sort of not do the vote yet, but to basically start to get the vote that would be filled in terms of what the vote would look like.
Yeah, stuff's in progress on that one.
So yeah, let me just add that link. Created to start capturing. Okay, the next one, no TSC, so nominating Richard. So Richard was confirmed. So welcome, Richard. Thanks for joining and all the work that got you here. Yes. Then the next one is to be or not to be in core number 1041, which I think we covered this earlier.
And because Michael and I talk way too much, Beth, Danielle, Nikita, Richard, anything to add on anything at all that we covered? Any thoughts, anything to say? It's okay if you don't, but go ahead, Danielle.
I don't have anything.
All right.
Okay, the next section would be strategic initiatives. So let me just take a quick look.
And Nikita put no comments in the chat. So.
Doc guides. And I don't see anybody here from the strategic initiative, so no updates this week. Anything else, that people want to bring up or have us discuss before we close out then? Okay, well, thanks for everybody's time. Thanks for anybody who's watching, and we'll hope to see you in GitHub in next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Actually, stick around, please. Sorry, but yeah, turn off the stream.
Okay, everybody stick around.